All right, so the big, beautiful bill passes 51-50 with J.D. Vance as the tie-breaking vote after Rand Paul, Tom Tillis, and Susan Collins voted against the bill, requiring a tie-breaking vote, obviously, from the VP. Good news, it does have some of the fundamental things that Trump noted today.
It's the greatest tax cut in the history of our country, and if it doesn't pass, it's the biggest tax increase in the history of our country. That alone, 68% increase, as opposed to a massive cut. It's the biggest tax cut in the history of our country, and everybody gets it.
That is 100% correct. This made the Trump tax cuts permanent, and if it had not passed, taxes would have gone up for 68% of Americans. But it's a far cry from what passed the House, or an even further cry from what Trump originally wanted. Look, I love Trump. There's no doubt to my MAGA bona fides, but I want him to be successful, but I think he's being taken advantage of behind the scenes by some people. I think he's being told one thing and they're doing another. Some very key provisions have been removed, and we're going to get to those in a sec. As I said yesterday, most of these were removed by a Democrat-appointed bureaucrat through a process called the Byrd Rule. What's the Byrd Rule? Okay? This requires reconciliation bills, which to this is to remain focused on fiscal issues, subjecting non-budgetary provisions to a point of order. 60 votes are required to waive the Byrd Rule, points of order, and then there's 6 rules of the Byrd Rule pillars, I guess you'd call them. Now, what are these 6 rules and their definitions? And I'm only going to read these in full to see how ridiculous this really is. 1, it does not produce a change in outlays or revenues unless it is a term or condition of a provision that does produce a change in outlays or revenues. 2, it produces an outlay increase or revenue decrease, and the instructed committee is not in compliance with its instruction. Okay. 3, it is outside the jurisdiction of the committee that submitted the title or provision, whatever that means. 4, it produces a change or outlays or revenues that are merely incidental to the non-budgetary components of the provision. 5, it would increase the deficit for a fiscal year beyond those covered by the reconciliation. 6, it violates Section 310G of the CBA, which prohibits recommendations to a reconciliation bill regarding Social Security, retirement, and disability insurance. You could see how a partisan pencil pusher or a politician might be able to convince someone about this or that or anything could violate any portion because it's so broadly written in language that nobody can read except for like a 50-year practicing lawyer. That's what politicians do, though, I guess, twist things. They did. Under the guise of procedural garbage, some of Trump's most ardent agenda items were completely stripped or remanded to a 60-vote majority in order to be included. This pre-voting process is called the Byrd Bath, where Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough, who I told you about yesterday, goes around chopping stuff under the guise of procedure. So what was cut? We told you yesterday about might be cut, but now it's on the record. Look, you know, on 2A Tuesday, I'm almost a single-issue voter on gun rights, and one of the key provisions that passed the House that tipped me over onto supporting this bill was the removal of suppressors and short-barreled rifles from the National Firearms Act. Nope. The Gifford organization, the anti-gun grabbing Gabby Gifford's gun group, applauding it, saying, today the Senate parliamentarian ruled that the provision of the big beautiful bill to remove safeguards that prevent gun silencers, which that's not what they are, and short-barreled firearms, short-barreled rifles, from ending up in the wrong hands must be taken out of the bill. Whatever. Look, I don't understand how a $200 tax stamp doesn't apply with the Byrd Rule because it isn't budgetary. Next one, and this is huge. We got all these tax cuts, which are fantastic for the American people. They really are. But there's not a lot of them to offset them. Okay? Some of the things that were there, again, kicked off under the Byrd Rule that was banning illegals from Medicare eligibility, specifically certain classes of migrants that might actually be here in a temporary status, which had 54 votes, but not the 60. Here, from the New York Times. The Senate parliamentarian determined that this provision does not comply with the chamber's rules, and it may be removed or modified. I'm sorry, we have laws that say you can't be here illegally, but we're not allowed to pass a law that doesn't allow those illegal people or people on temporary status to receive my tax dollars? I mean, seriously? But this goes in the same vein as something that nearly every Democrat objected to in this bill, which was that they're hiring 10,000 more ICE agents, which is weird because they called that fiscally irresponsible, but had zero problem hiring 87,000 IRS agents to persecute actual tax-paying citizens. Same thing with private school vouchers. She nixed that too. That was huge for people like me who hate the public school system as it has become. Ban on federal funding for child sex change surgeries. Apparently you can't do that either, which is weird because the Supreme Court just gave parents the right to opt out of the educational side of that. All this stuff stripped out that passed the House. Ban on courts punishing Trump officials for contempt. Nixed the sell-off of post office electric vehicles. Apparently we can't do that. We have to charge a fee for unions to use federal buildings. It sounds an awful lot like a budgetary issue to that. Can't cut EPA mandates either. Can't pass voter ID because a non-elected person said so. Funding for sanctuary cities? Nope. According to the American Prospect, limitations on grant funding for sanctuary cities? Out. No tax on tips. After a bit of debate, it did make it onto page 274. Now, I don't understand. Democrats even stole this policy. It passed the Senate unanimously as a standalone bill. Unanimously. The House never took it up, but they did put it in the BBB. And now the Senate will say there's no tax on tips, but only up to $25,000, which if you make a living as a waitress, you're often making minimum wage, or in some states far less, because you survive almost 100% on your tips. Average waitress at the moderately nice restaurant down the street, 15 to 20 tables a night. Average bill, call it $150, $25 to $30 tip times 20. That could be $600 a night. You could reach that $25,000 limit in 2 to 3 months. Also, the taxes on 25 grand would only be like 2 or 3 grand tops if you're in that tax bracket. I mean, this sounds nice, but it's not what was promised. All these senators told us no tax on tips, not some tax on tips. This had to be changed because one unelected woman. She just cost the mother trying to support her kids thousands of dollars a year. Great job, lady. You see how insane all this is. Look, I am out on this bill as the Senate passed it. I am. Sorry, not sorry. Like I said, love you, Donald Trump, but I think you're being misled on the new perverted product of what you just saw get passed out of the Senate, and especially what you intended this to be. This was noted by a guest on Ron Paul's podcast, how the House and even Trump is getting fleeced by some woman that no one elected.
What they did is all of the carrots that the leadership put in on the Republican House, on the House version of the bill to appease conservatives were ripped out by the Senate. We got you, we suckered you into voting for it, and they were ripped out.
And then the Senate, instead of firing or even overruling her, voted on it. Sure, we got all these tax cuts, which, look, again, super great, okay? But not many not many things to add money back to the budget. The government gets less revenue, still has to pay for illegals, has to spend more money on a ton of things, including defense, and raises the debt ceiling, which, by the way, what's the point of having a debt ceiling if you can just raise it? If your toilet is overflowing and filling up your house, do you raise the ceiling? Or do you fix the toilet and pump the crap out? I also find it disturbing that we had multiple people working on this today, reading through whatever was available, and we had no access to this bill in its entirety with adequate time to read it among 6 people, which means neither did senators. If the Senate's version of this stays in place as is, apparently all we can do is just spend money. We're not allowed to stop spending any. So now it's on to the House. And what happens next? What options do they have? Not many.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.